Welcome back, YouTube. In this episode, I'm going to install Windows 98 on my Pentium 4 system. As a refresher, this is a HP D530 Pentium 4 2.8 gigahertz with 2 gigabytes of RAM and two 40 gigabyte hard drives on it. One of the hard drives already had Windows XP on it, and in my previous episodes, I did upgrade the hard drive to Windows XP Service Pack 4, which is an unofficial service pack, but it definitely has helped me as far as running the system and having all the available updates. I was thinking that the first thing I would do with this system is I would actually format the second 40 gigabyte hard drive and put Windows 98 on that drive. And my thoughts were, well, why not format it FAT32? But I found out that when I go to format this drive, as you're going to see here, you actually, I don't know why, I don't know if it's my installation of Windows XP or what's going on, but I can't actually format this drive as FAT32, which surprised me. I didn't want to use exFAT, that's for sure. So my two choices were NTFS or exFAT, which I did not want. So yeah, I can't format it here anyway as FAT32. And the whole reason that I want to do that is what I was hoping to do was download all of the drivers for all the hardware that I have, motherboard, chipset, graphics, audio, and I have a Wi-Fi card. Get all those drivers and go ahead and copy them over to the newly partitioned FAT32 partition. But that actually didn't work, at least here. And so what I think I'm going to do is probably try to do it in the command line. But one of the problems I've been having with this system is that it actually is running terrible. When I booted it up, and I didn't show you that because I didn't want you to have to wait, the boot up took, I don't know, a good 4 or 5 minutes, which surprised me because before it was actually running really well. And I found out that the reason for the slow boot up was AVG antivirus. And really, I should have done a little bit more homework. I need a very light footprint antivirus solution for this computer, and AVG is not it. It's a huge hog. I mean, I'm glad it still works for XP. That's wonderful, but I definitely don't have enough power to run this system with AVG. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do an uninstall, and I'm going to run without antivirus for a little while. I'm using Firefox, and I've got a bunch of plugins in Firefox anyway so that I don't get ads and things like that. So I think it'll be all right to run it a little while, and the main purpose of the system is not browsing the internet anyway. It's really so I can play games. That was the whole point. So I kept getting this error message that an installation was already in progress, and I think that basically what it was telling me is that it was updating to a new version of AVG, not just the signature files, but also a whole new engine, which shocked me because I had just installed that maybe 10 days ago. So unfortunately, I had to find all the services. Well, first I temporarily disabled protection. Then I killed as many of the services as I could. And then I'm going to try and do the uninstall again. It's funny, I was thinking back, doing this install with Windows 98, doing an install with Windows XP, I had forgotten, especially with Windows 98, how much trouble it can actually be. Things just don't go as smoothly as I expected them to. So I kept killing AVG processes until I could get AVG to let me do an uninstall, which took a long time. Once AVG is uninstalled, I think the system's going to be much better off. And honestly, I don't want performance to be hit that greatly. You can see that AVG was taking up 35% of the CPU's time. And that's just too much if I want to play any games halfway decently on this system, even if they're older games. I really don't want to lose all that performance. So uninstalling AVG was incredibly difficult. Unfortunately, it's just not well suited for XP. So I've sped up this portion because it really took some time to get AVG uninstalled. Good idea, bad implementation, really, for a slower Windows XP machine. And I had to reboot so I could uninstall the second part. And the irony was, after all that work, every time I reboot the system, I get an alert telling me that I should install AVG, and I can click OK or dismiss, which was very frustrating. So once I got that uninstalled and I was able to reboot the system, I decided to try to go into disk management and see if I could actually delete the current partition and create a new partition, because I really wanted to do FAT32 for this system. I definitely don't want to do FAT16. And even here I couldn't do it. So what I decided to do, since this wasn't working, I did create the partition. I did not format it. And I figured I would try the tried and true and trusty command line, because I know it has a FAT32 switch there to allow me to finally get this drive set up as FAT32. Or so I thought. You see, because what I didn't know through all of this was that the drive was not set for LBA. So it was going to work just fine as an NTFS drive on a more modern operating system, but it would not work correctly until I turned LBA on in the BIOS. So I'm going to speed this section up quite a bit here. Basically what I decided to do was use the command line and do a format for FAT32. And although it looked like it was formatting, it actually did not work. And Windows XP, when I was done formatting it, could not actually use the drive. It still saw it as an unformatted partition. So I eventually had to go back and reformat it. So while I was waiting for it to format, which probably took me an hour or so, I went ahead and started downloading all the drivers so that I could move them over to the hard drive, the FAT32 partition. But then I found out, of course, it still wasn't working, even after all that work formatting it. And I still wasn't really sure why it wasn't working. And so I put my Windows 98 CD in. rebooted the system, and I went into the BIOS because I wanted to boot from the second hard drive, but I actually could not find anywhere where I could just boot from the second hard drive. There was no boot order or anything like that. I mean, there was a boot order, but you could only select the first hard drive. You could not select the second hard drive. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to unplug it anyway because I don't think I really need it. The XP drive once I get the files transferred over, but first I've got to get this thing formatted as FAT32. So I started my Windows 98 setup, and I got some really strange error messages. The first thing that happened, it complained about the drive geometry not being set right, which kind of clued me in that there was a problem in the BIOS and I should go in and have a look. And I'm changing my TV settings so I can make the screen a little bit bigger so you guys can see it a little better. So here it is formatting the drive again. And what was interesting was that I didn't know it, but it was actually formatting it as FAT16. I didn't get a choice, and this is the Windows 98 SE Special Edition. So my thinking was, well, of course it's going to format it as FAT32. It pretty much is the best mode to use. But it did not. It actually formatted it this first time as FAT16. And shortly here after the format was when I started getting the LB errors. I thought, you know, this is old school. I got to start thinking back to when I used to do Windows 98 installs. What could be going wrong with this drive? What's going on? And that's when I began thinking, you know, I'm really wondering if the BIOS isn't really able to handle this drive. Maybe it's too big, but I thought that's ridiculous. It's only a 40 gigabyte drive. How could it be too big? So once the drive was formatted, it says, okay, we're going to continue setup, press enter. And of course, the first thing it wants to do is run a scan disk of the drive to check it. I thought, you know, I'm not too worried about it. I've had situations like this before, and it worked perfectly fine. So I'll just tell it continue. And I get a second warning. It says, you know, if this LBA setting isn't correct, you could really cause problems. You could corrupt data on your drive, which I don't care about. I mean, come on, we're formatting the whole drive, right? So then it insists that it's going to do a surface scan, and I thought, no. I'm not sitting here for a whole surface scan. I should be able to skip the surface scan. So I skipped it. And I got an error message that says, no, you know, you're required to do, you can't see it up there at the end of the screen, but you're required to do the surface scan in order to use this. And that's when I started thinking, no, I definitely have to go in and check the BIOS and see what the heck I didn't get right. So after I rebooted, after the so-called format of the drive, it couldn't even read the C drive. I kept getting errors. So I was pretty convinced at this point I had an issue. I tried to press enter to continue on, and I got another error. So I rebooted and went into the BIOS. And I know the screen is really tiny. I went in and looked at the drive itself. And I realized that I would have to set the setting for LBA. So I made that change. I'm going to reboot the system. So when the system comes up, even though I changed it to LBA, I could not read the drive, which isn't a big deal, but I couldn't do anything else. So I rebooted and I booted into DOS, and I went into fdisk, deleted all the partitions, created a primary partition. Which actually works. So I figured Windows 98 installer couldn't read the drive anyway, so I'm going to need to repartition it. Set the partition as active so it'll be bootable. And finally, and I thought my troubles were over, but it wasn't. But fdisk did help me get the drive back in order, and I was able to boot from the cd-rom, and I was finally able to start the Windows 98 install. So I'm thinking at this point everything's going to be fine now with my install, and then I see this error message, and I'm thinking, well, I've got 2 gigabytes of RAM. How can I possibly be out of memory and not be able to run Windows? Long story short, what I found out was I needed to add a line to the 386 enhanced section of system.ini that would basically limit my RAM to 768 megabytes, which was apparently all that's accepted. And this was a Microsoft fix. So I went ahead and did that. And after that, I was finally able to get into Windows itself. So if you go into system.ini in the Windows directory, and in the 386 ENH or 386 enhanced section, I always go down to the bottom line, and you have to add max fizz page equals 30,000, and this is the largest it can be according to Microsoft, according to the help that I found. And once I did that, instead of doing a reboot, I actually just typed win, and the installer continued. So I was able to wrap up the install. I don't remember ever having that problem, but of course my old Windows 98 machines never had that much RAM either. So after another 5 or 10 minutes or so, I finally was able to get into Windows 98. Wow, that was a bit of a party. So once I got Windows booted up, I'm thinking, well, that's the end of my troubles. From here on out, it's all going to be straightforward. What could possibly go wrong? Well, apparently quite a lot. After all, it is Windows 98. First problem, I don't have any USB. All right, well, I have a bit of a problem because I don't have any USB drivers, so I'm going to have to plug in my Windows XP disk, which I'm plugging in here, and I'm going to boot up and copy the drivers over to the Windows 98 FAT32 drive, and then I can install the drivers, which will give me all the support I need for the hardware. So let's power it up and see how it goes. Okay, so the first thing that happens is it has a error letting me know that my configuration has changed, so I have to press F1. Then I can boot up. Oh, it's actually going to try to boot from CD-ROM again, but we're going to boot to the hard disk. Oh, good. So here comes my Windows XP disk again. Alright, slowly but surely. The floppy drive is not working on this system, and I don't have any disks to burn, so this just seemed to be the easiest route. So I have... How interesting. I'm still not seeing that thumb drive. Oops. Alright, well, we'll try a different port. There we go. I like how I've uninstalled AVG and still it's constantly asking me if I want to reinstall AVG. Go figure. Okay, so this is what I need. Let's see if I can see the FAT32 drive. Yep. So we'll make a new folder. Call it drivers. And we are going to copy this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and I do have a Wi-Fi card in there, WNA 1100, and I'm really hoping I can get one of these versions working. So I'm going to copy all of them over here. Once this copy is completed, I will close this out, shut down the computer, and we're going to boot back into Windows 98. Alright, we're booting back into Windows 98. And unfortunately, I cannot do this installation here because, hey buddy, I have to install the actual driver, and it's an executable. This mouse is very difficult to work with. I really need those drivers installed. Okay, so there's our happy Windows 98 startup. move this back so you can see more of the screen. And like I say, with the mouse I'm using, it's really cheap, so it basically doesn't work. I gotta upgrade, but it was a Wi-Fi mouse I had sitting around, so I figured what the heck. Okay, so let's cruise into the C drive. There's our drivers. Now I don't really know which one of these is which, so I guess I just have to go with it. Well, there's our graphics driver, so what the heck, we'll start with that. Don't mind the sounds of my puppy dog chewing her bone down here. She's as happy as a clam. I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to say start my computer later and see if I can get 2 of these in. And once again, now I'm have to decide to boot from hard disk or CD because I had to put the Windows 98 CD back in, which for whatever reason isn't even being recognized, the DVD drive. No ADI codec driver is installed, huh? I hope that doesn't mean I'm not going to have sound. Okay. No sound. I'm going to let this screen come up. I was pretty sure there was some sound that came with it that was pretty cool, and I wanted to hear it again. It looks like the sound driver's installed. Let's see if we can change screen res. We'll cruise over to properties, settings. Uh-oh. It's broke now. Alright, let's see if we can get full HD. 1920 by 1080. If it doesn't work, I get 15 seconds. It's gotta work. It works in XP. Come on, you can do it. I guess not. Gosh, I guess I'm being too... Let's just try 800 by 600. Yeah, that works. So we'll say yes to that, and then we'll do 1024 by 68. Apply, okay. Yes. Looks awful, doesn't it? How about... Well, I tried that. That didn't work. .1152 by 864. Yes, that works. So I think I'll go with that for right now. All right, there's 1152 by 864, I believe. The only thing that bumps me out is I don't have any sound. So, let's see if I can figure that out. I don't really want to add new hardware. At least my mouse and keyboard came back. Mostly. It doesn't really seem to know I'm clicking. That's curious. Can we right-click it? Okay. I guess that's what we'll do. We need device manager. Yeah, I have no... Okay, finally left mouse showed up. Maybe that has something to do with it. Look at that. No Ethernet controller. No... Oh, all that time it wasn't in focus. I apologize. You haven't missed much. This is like try number 3 for... Ooh, all right. Check it out. Well, that didn't take long to get a blue screen now, did it? And of course my keyboard doesn't work. Oh boy, I can tell I'm going to have to condense this video down because this is literally going to take hours upon hours to do. All right, well, we have a blue screen. I'm just going to power it off and back on and go from there. All right, so after quite a bit of work, I was successfully able to get Windows 98 completely installed. I had quite a few blue screens and issues that didn't seem to take care of themselves, and I could not get sound working or anything working correctly. So I still do have a couple of issues, but what fixed the majority of my problems was installing. I found an unofficial service pack that included all of the updates that have ever been done to Windows 98. If I go into Control Panel and go into System and Device Manager, I've still got a couple of things that aren't working. This particular controller is turned off in the BIOS, that's why it's showing up with an exclamation point. But I disabled the PCI Universal Serial Bus, which is the 2.0 bus, which isn't working, but the ports in the back, which I believe are still USB 2.0, are working perfectly fine, so I'm able to do USB now. The one thing I am not yet able to get working is the onboard gigabit LAN, which is an Intel based. I think what's going on there, I disabled a whole bunch of stuff in the BIOS, like COM port 1, parallel port, all those things that I don't need. And this actually was finally recognized before it wasn't recognized as an actual 82557 compliant LAN network interface card. Once I shut down the majority of that stuff in the BIOS, turned it off, it now showed up. So I think I've got a little bit more work to do, and I should be able to get the LAN working. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my WNA 1100 Netgear Wi-Fi card working because it doesn't have Windows 98 drivers. Otherwise, everything's working awesome. I'm pretty geeked. Next episode for this particular series will be installing some games and having a little bit of fun. So I've got Windows XP and Windows 98 installed, and all is well. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and I want to see you again in the next video. Hope you're enjoying the channel, and we'll see you next time.